So over the next few minutes, I want to take this opportunity to just orient you to the comms lab. I guess the first thing to say is that we really do consider this a communications laboratory. And there's a couple of reasons why that metaphor is so appropriate for this. The first reason is that safety is really important to us. And I'm not talking about physical safety. Hopefully that side of things is taken care of wherever you are, comfortable sitting in a seat somewhere away from harm. What I'm talking about is psychological safety. And it really is our paramount concern to make sure that everyone feels that this is a learning environment, that they can try new things, that they can do things out of the ordinary or a little different to how they would normally do things, and that it is safe to do so. Now, I would say that that's a burden to be carried by the facilitators, us, but I also want to emphasize the fact that we all have some responsibility in making this a safe learning environment. The other reason why a laboratory is such a good metaphor for what we're creating here is that we really do want you to conduct experiments. We want you to try things that are completely out of the ordinary for you. If you really wanted to, you could intentionally make every mistake in the book just to see how it would turn out. That's totally fine. The point is that we hope to simulate an environment that does some justice to the kinds of challenges that you face in your day-to-day work, in your day-to-day life. And if we can do that, but take away the stakes, it means you have a really good opportunity to put yourself in that position and yet have no big downside if things don't go the way you'd like them. So that's why we call this the comms lab. I want to say a few words about Zoom. We'll be conducting our comms lab via the Zoom platform, which we find to be really effective. A couple of things regarding basic Zoom etiquette. First thing, keep your video camera on unless you're actually moving away from your screen. Second thing, keep yourself muted unless you need to say something. When you need to say something, use the hand up function or just unmute yourself and we'll refer to you to get you explaining what's on your mind. Let's talk about how the process actually works. Ideally, a comms lab will have an experienced facilitator who has a good knowledge of the science and art of communication. The facilitator's role is to maintain the psychological safety of the learning environment, coordinate the group, correct course when they need to keep the session on track, and from time to time, add perspectives based on their expertise. The facilitator is not a guru. The facilitator is not an oracle. And the facilitator is not the font of all knowledge. If a facilitator is doing a good job, they are utilizing the skills and experience of everyone in the group. And inevitably, they will learn something from the session as well. Besides the facilitator, an effective comms lab will also have an experienced actor. Their role is to simulate your counterpart in the conversation, or as we like to term it, your conversation partner. A good actor will remain in character throughout the session. They'll be primed to respond in a certain way to maximize the learning of the group. They will also be able to articulate how certain communication strategies make them feel, or what their internal experience is at any particular moment. As I'm sure you'll discover, this combination can really accelerate your learning. Just to give you a tiny bit of background on our methodology, we style our learning environment on a method known as agenda-led outcome-based analysis, or ALOBA. The method is actually quite unique for its foundation in scientific evidence and its proven efficacy in a growing variety of settings. It's also unique for its focus on the needs of the learner. One thing you'll notice during the session is that the facilitators will continually be looking to understand your concerns, i.e. your agenda, and your goals, or the outcome you're after. And they'll be looking to tailor your learning experience around these. In order to maximize the amount you guys are going to get out of this experience, we intentionally make it experiential. And there's no way around the fact that that involves role play. Now, I can give you some honest opinions about how I feel about role play. When I am the participant in one of these workshops, and believe me, I've been a participant in many of these kinds of workshops over the years, I get extremely nervous about role play. My heart beats faster, I get sweaty in the palms. What I do know though is that, if I make a mistake in one of these sessions, that's something that not only I can learn from, but that everyone else can learn from as well. And I think it's also really important to be clear about the fact that we apply the Vegas rules. What do I mean by this? Well, as we all know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And so in the same way, what happens in Comms Lab stays in Comms Lab. Now, I do want to make a slight modification to that rule because really what we're doing in Comms Lab is developing skills that we can actually take out into the world. So what I mean by that specifically is that it is really important that we respect the confidentiality of everyone else who's involved in the session and that they respect ours. For example, we don't record the session and we don't discuss anyone's performance or the way they communicated within the session except for our own internal quality assurance and quality improvement process. Now, of course, we wouldn't actually use role play unless there was some pretty massive upsides. The bottom line is that the evidence shows that experiential learning, in other words, actually performing the skills that you want to learn, is the only way, or at least the most rapid way, to learn the new skills. We think about the whole process in terms of a very sort of brain-based model. So learning new skills at a brain level actually represents laying down new neural pathways, establishing those pathways, consolidating those pathways, and practicing until those pathways become true habits. That can feel a little clunky at first, but as you continually develop your habits in these ways, eventually it'll be natural. When you're in the Comms Lab, you're going to have a turn in the hot seat. The hot seat is the place you sit when you are actually interacting with the actor. It's really important to know, again, and I know I've already said this, but I really want to emphasize it. This is a zero stakes environment where you get to make mistakes if you want to. Treat it like a laboratory, experiment, try new things. It's also really important to know that you can stop at any time. In fact, it's really helpful to the facilitator and to the group at large, really, if you stop at the point where you're sort of not really feeling sure about what to do next. You might have reached some kind of decision point, you might want to ask someone's advice, you might want to get the opinion of the group, you might want to get a few different suggestions and then kind of pick out the best one. So at any moment, really, you can just say time out and we'll stop the role play and we'll have a chat about what's actually happening. Now, it's also important to say that if you don't time out, at some point, the facilitator will time you out. And that's usually after no more than 1 or 2 minutes of actual role play time. It's usually because as a facilitator, we are trying to keep track of the whole conversation. And at some point our brains fill up and we can't actually fit any more in, or our hand gets too tired from writing. So if that's the case, don't take it the wrong way. It's just that we've filled our brains and we have enough learning points to work with. It's also really important to know that if you are participating in the group but you're not actually in the hot seat at the time, you still have a really important role to play. And that role is around active observation. There's so much to be gained from watching someone else do something really well, and there's also a lot to be gained from watching someone do something that you might have done differently. We try to make a point of deconstructing skills as well and developing a language around skills so that you'll be more aware of what your options are in the moment when it comes to the real life scenario. The other thing you'll be called upon to do is to give feedback. This in itself is a really important skill, and it's an amazing opportunity to develop that skill. There's a few basic rules that are worth following when you're giving feedback. The first rule is that it should be supportive. What do I mean by supportive? Well, your feedback really should align with the goals of the person you're speaking to. The second thing is that it should be balanced. it's really important that we consider both the things that were effective and the things that were less effective. The third thing that's really important is that it should be non-judgmental. When I say non-judgmental, I'm really referring to the avoidance of any kind of evaluative language. Whether it's positive or negative, that kind of language is not actually that helpful. So what is helpful in terms of the language of feedback? Well, we get to that with our fourth criterion, and that is being specific. And when I say being specific, what I mean is that it is so important to think about this in a kind of mechanistic way. I saw you do this, and the result of that was this. A happened, and that led to B, which led to C, which led to D. Being really specific in this way allows the person in the hot seat to really see what they did from a very objective perspective, which is way more effective for their learning than just hearing that was good and that was bad. So what's the bottom line of Comms Lab? The bottom line is we want you to experiment, we want you to be courageous, we want you to be supportive, and we want you to have fun. Remember, we're here to learn, and we're here to learn rapidly. We are aiming to create the perfect conditions for new understandings to arise and new skills to take root. We can't promise that this is going to be easy, but I think we can promise that if you're willing to follow the principles that I've laid out in this video, it will be incredibly useful. I'll see you in the lab.